In this previous video, you learned how to upload files to the server using the file input control. Using a file input control, you can simply select files and then click a button to upload or post them to the server, and they get saved on the server. But in reality, sometimes you might want to have the user look at a file. For example, if you're creating a dating website or any kind of website, a social media website, say LinkedIn or something, and you have users upload their pictures, they obviously want to look at the picture they've uploaded. So that's a case for reading a file that's been uploaded. Today we learn about a nifty class. It's called the FileReader, and that helps us read files. I'll start with a form tag and have a file input control. Since I'm not keen on posting this file, I will not give the file input type control a name. I just want to demonstrate how to read the file on the client. And for the same reason, I will not take a submit button or use the method post on the form as an attribute, and also not use the enc type attribute on the form. What we're going to do is we're going to allow the user to select a text file. So let me accept only text files. Let's just say plain text files for the moment. And I will have a text area in which I'll display the contents. So let me give this an ID. So I'll give the text area an ID called preview, and I'll let it span 20 rows. Now, just for visibility's sake, I'll make everything big. So let me add a CSS file. So all text in the body will be, let's say, 40 pixels big, and also all text in the text area will be 40 pixels big. Actually, 40 is too much. Let's just say 25 pixels. Let's get to the JavaScript. I'll include jQuery for convenience sake, and a custom script in which we'll use the file reader. As we learned in the video where we learned to use the file input control, the change event is fired whenever a user selects a file. So I'll write a handler for the change event on the file input control. In this event, I want to see which file the user has selected and display its contents. I want to read the file and display its contents in the text area. So first I need to grab the file. You will remember that there's a multiple attribute that you can add to select multiple files. Since we haven't added that, the user is going to be able to select just a single file. So that's good, and that's what we want in this example, to keep things simple. To access the files property is the property on the file input control that we are after. First, to get to the files property, we need access to the file input control itself, which is the target of this event. So the file input control can be gotten by saying event.target, and the files can be gotten by file input control.files. And since there's only going to be one file, but just to write good code that's extensible, so that tomorrow if you add the multiple attribute allowing the user to select multiple files, this code should still work without changes. I'll just say let first file out of these files be files 0th element. Here on we start using the file reader. The file reader, let's initialize the file reader first. There's a class or a function called FileReader. We new up an object of that. And then we call one of the methods, one of the read methods on the FileReader. There are several methods on the FileReader class that return different kinds of data. You can return binary data as a byte array. You can return binary data as a string. You can have binary data be returned as a base64 encoded URL, or you can return text data simply as text. Since we're reading a text file, I'll call the read as text method and supply the first file object, that is the file we're interested in reading, to this. This method reads the file and then calls a callback. It actually doesn't call a callback that you specify. It actually fires an event called onload. So even before I start reading the file, I need to write a handler for the onload. I can do that in two ways. I can say FileReader.onload and specify a function here. Or I could say FileReader.onLoad and then specify a function here. Both of these are okay. I'll just go with this one for no particular reason. Since this is an event listener, it will be passed an event object by the caller. The file reader onload event is fired when the file reader has finished reading the file. There are other events on the file reader that you want to look up on your own time, which I'm not going to go into. This is the most important stuff that I'm covering. So all you're interested in, if you want to read a text file, is read as text, the method, and this onload event. This is fired when the file has been completely read. And the result property of the file reader contains the resultant contents of the file. So I can get those by saying FileReader.result. That'll be the contents of the file just read. Or a better practice, rather than using this, I'm using this based on a closure. Or I can simply refer to the file reader from within this event as event.target, because this event is fired on the receiver file reader. So file reader would be the target of this event. I can access it like this. And then all I have to do is say the text area, which has the ID preview, let its HTML or let its text be file contents. That's it. Let's put it to use. I do not need a web server because I'm not posting anything. Let me just increase the width. It doesn't look nice. Okay, that's a little better. So I'll click this button to select a file. That's basically how you use it. But let me show you a couple of other methods on this file reader. You can actually use it to read even images or binary data such as audio and video. Let's do each an image. Let's read an image file, then an audio file, and then a video file. I don't need to make any changes over here. I still need the user to be able to select a file, and as the file selection changes, we get a reference to the file input control and then to all the files that the user has selected, in which in our case is going to be just one file, but still, as a good habit, we get the first of those files from that collection, and then we open an instance of the file reader. This is going to be the same. We declare an onload handler. We might have to change this. I'll come back to this in a bit. And then instead of calling read as text, because this is a binary file, we can read it as text, and I'll show you what it'll look like if we read it as text. Actually, this is an image control, so I can't even display text in any which ways. I can't display text anyways. Just to show you what this looks like, I can set a breakpoint here, in fact here, after the file contents have been read. Event.target.result. And that's what the binary file looks like with the UTF encoding. To actually get the image file as binary, the method you want to use is read as data URL. This method reads the contents of a binary file, encodes them into a base64 string, and then prepends something like data slash base64, I don't know, data hyphen base64 slash, and then it has the base64 encoded contents, base64 encoded string, which denote the contents of the file. And the URL, this is called a data URL, and the browser and the JavaScript engine have this agreement or convention that if it encounters, the browser encounters this, something like this, then that's good enough, as good enough as a URL for the browser, and it'll parse that as a URL. Basically, it'll understand that it needs to base64 decode this and display the contents. And so wherever you can set the src property, or wherever you set a URL in any HTML element, you can set a data URL as well if you don't have a file URL. And since we don't have a file URL, because this is a file that's been uploaded, or that's been selected from the user's file system, which is, as far as JavaScript is concerned and the browser is concerned, a black box to us. That's an abstraction. So this gives us a URL that we can work with, and then we can set this URL as the src attribute of an image control. Mind you, you don't need to do this. The data URL works just fine for an image control. Wherever there is an src attribute, it accepts just the data URL without having called the URL CSS function. But if you're setting this data URL as the background of a div, then you need to call, for a background image property, you need to call this URL function. Let's do both. This is an image control, so I'll just run this code as it is. I'll select an image file. Let me change the accept attribute to images. And I'll select this file, and it's been selected. This was an image control. Let me change this to a div and set the background image for the div to be, to set the background image, I'll have to say CSS background image to be, and here I'll have to use the URL function, otherwise it won't work. I'll refresh this and set this, and then it's repeating, so you have to set those background repeat, no repeat, and those kinds of properties, which I'm sure you know how to use, or you can look up. You want to set the background size, the background repeat, background origin, and those kinds of properties on this. But as far as how to read the file, which is what the focus of this video is, I hope it's clear to you. This is how you read any binary file. Let's read an audio file now. So I'll need an audio control. I'll still call it preview, and I just need this attribute is required on an audio or video element for it to be visible and displayed. If you don't do this, the audio or video control is not displayed, even if you specify a height and width and all that stuff. So I don't need this anyway now, so I can comment out this. You see, I don't see the audio control unless I say controls, and now I'll be able to see it. Since it's an audio control, I need to set the src to this data URL without this. And now it should work.
The diseases are hardened and chronic vices, such as greed and ambition. They have enfolded the mind in too close a grip, and have begun to be permanent evils thereof. To give the brief definition, by disease we mean a persistent perversion of the judgment, so that things which are mildly desirable are thought to be highly desirable, or, if you prefer, we may define it thus: to be too zealous in striving for things which are only mildly desirable, or not desirable at all, or to value highly things which ought to be valued but slightly, or valued not at all. Passions are objectionable impulses of the spirit, sudden and vehement. They have come so often, and so little attention has been paid to them, that they have caused a state of disease.
Let's now make it a video control and see if we can play video using exactly the same code. I won't have to make any changes at all. That's it. I'll refresh this page, and this time we have a video control. I'll browse for a video file. I have a video file here.
And now I thank God for that. You never own anything. It always owns you. Whether it's jewelry, whether it's clothes, whether it's ministerial posts, whether it's anything, it owns you, it consumes you.
Do you want to become a software developer? Or do you want to become a better software developer if you're already one? If you need help learning software development from the ground up, from scratch, I will be starting an online course. To be informed when the course is launched, please go to the website, scroll down to the bottom of the page, and join the mailing list so I can send you an email as soon as the course is launched.
Sitaram, Sitaram, Sitaram kahiye, Jai Virira Keram, Tai Virira hiye. Sitaram, Sitaram, Sitaram kahiye, Jai Virira Keram, Tai Virira hiye. Sitaram, Sitaram, Sitaram kahiye, Jai Virira Keram, Tai Virira hiye. Sitaram, Sitaram, Sitaram kahiye, Jai Virira Keram, Tai Virira hiye.
We hold that there is a succession of causes from which fate is woven. Similarly, you may be sure there is a succession in our desires, for one begins where its predecessor ends. You have been thrust into an existence which will never in itself put an end to your wretchedness and your slavery. Withdraw your chafed neck from the yoke. If you retreat to privacy, everything will be on a smaller scale, but you will be satisfied abundantly. In your present condition, however, there is no satisfaction in the plenty which is heaped upon you on all sides. Would you rather be poor and sated, or rich and hungry? Prosperity is not only greedy, but it also lies exposed to the greed of others. And so long as nothing satisfies you, you yourself cannot satisfy others.
चाहिए